Let's get started. Number 10. Volunteer to Hell, Witold Pilecki. Imagine volunteering to get arrested, and not for a prank, but for sheer survival of others. That's exactly what Witold Pilecki did. In September 1940, he intentionally allowed himself to be captured by the Nazis so he could be sent to Auschwitz, infiltrate the camp, and report on its horrors. Inside the camp, he built a secret resistance network, wrote detailed reports on German atrocities, and smuggled them out to the Allies, all while living in the world's worst prison. Then, in April 1943, he escaped, an act most people would call impossible. But the story doesn't end with escape. After the war, he was imprisoned by the Soviet-backed Polish government, executed in 1948, and only decades later, fully recognized as a hero. The twist: survival here isn't about physical endurance. It's about moral endurance, choosing to stay alive for others while immersed in death. Pilecki's silent mission reminds us that sometimes the bravest survival is not of the body, but of the conscience. Number 9. Frozen solid, then alive. Jean Hilliard. Picture a Minnesota night at -22 °C, about 30 degrees. Jean Hilliard, age 19 in December 1980, slipped off a rural icy road and collapsed just yards from help. She lay there for 6 hours, her body frozen solid, her pulse nearly gone. Doctors later described her as having a gonal rhythm, almost dead. Yet she woke up. No brain damage, no major frostbite. Miraculous? Yes. The biological explanation? Extreme hypothermia can slow metabolism so much that the brain gets preserved. And in her case, exactly that happened. Her own words, it was like falling asleep. The horror twist. There's a thin line between death and dormancy, and Joan walked that icy edge and returned. For us, her story is a reminder. Sometimes survival isn't fighting, it's freezing and waiting. Number 8. Fall 10,000 feet, walk 11 days. Juliane Koepcke. Imagine boarding a plane, getting struck by lightning, falling 10,000 feet, around 3,000 mem, still strapped to your seat, and then waking up in the jungle. That happened to Juliane Koepcke on December 24, 1971, when Lanza Flight 508 broke apart mid-air over Peru. She suffered a concussion, broken collarbone, one sandal only in the dense Amazon. But for 11 days she followed a creek because her zoologist father had taught her. Water leads to civilization. She dealt with botfly larvae in her wound, insect bites, hunger, and still found a logging camp and rescued herself. The twist: survival isn't just about the fall, it's what you do after you hit the ground. Juliane's remarkable calm, carrying the mindset of a researcher turned survivor, turned disaster into story. And it flips our phrase: falling to your death isn't always literal. Sometimes it's the beginning of every survival. Number 7. Cut off to climb out. Aron Ralston. When you go canyoneering alone in Utah, specifically Blue John Canyon, and you don't tell anyone where you are, the odds are very, very bad. On April 26, 2003, Aron Ralston dislodged a boulder. His right arm was pinned against a canyon wall. For 5 days, he rationed 12 Oz, about 350 ml of water, 2 burritos, tried to chip the rock. Then he made the decision no one imagines. He broke his own forearm bones, strapped a tourniquet, and amputated his own right arm with a dull pocket knife. After freeing himself, he rappelled down 65 feet and hiked miles out of the canyon until a family found him. The horror turn. When your body betrays you, survival may demand you betray a part of you. Ralston's grit is brutal, undeniable, but also a testament to human will. "If I had waited longer, I would have died," he said. Survival sometimes means self-sacrifice. His story teaches that the mind's decision often outweighs the body's condition. Number 6. 438 days adrift at sea. José Salvador Alvarenga. Imagine setting out on a 30-hour fishing trip near Mexico's coast and ending up 14 months later on a remote atoll in the Pacific, thousands of miles away. That's what José Salvador Alvarenga experienced. In November 2012, he left the coast of Chiapas, Mexico, with a young, inexperienced mate. A storm hit, the engine failed, the electronics died, they drifted. His companion, after about 4 months, refused the diet of turtle blood, raw fish, and bird meat, and died of starvation. Alvarenga kept drifting for a total 438 days until he swam ashore on Ibon Atoll, Marshall Islands, on January 30th, 2014. He survived by harvesting rain, capturing turtles' birds, drinking turtle blood and urine when necessary. His mind? He kept track of moon cycles, saw container ships pass by without being rescued. He said he dreamed of tortillas and family. The twist: survival here isn't anchored in exotic gear. It's anchored in will when every resource fails. Alvarenga's story forces us to ask, if the world lets you drift, what keeps you from disappearing? And maybe the answer to survival is in stubborn hope, not perfect preparation. Number 5, the train that refused to die. Violet Jessop. Violet Jessop should have been a sailor's curse, but instead, she was history's luckiest survivor. Born in 1887, she worked as a stewardess on 3 famous ships. The first was RMS Olympic, which collided with a warship in 1911. She survived. Then she joined the Titanic in 1912. Yes, that Titanic, and lived through its sinking after helping passengers into lifeboats and climbing aboard one herself. You'd think she'd retire, right? Wrong. In 1916, during World War I, she served on the HMHS Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship, when it struck a mine and sank in the Aegean Sea. Violet escaped again, though she cracked her skull on a lifeboat's keel during the explosion. That's 3 ocean disasters, and she lived through all of them. She later joked that the sea just didn't want me, but the psychological part of her story is wild. She went back to work at sea after surviving 3 near deaths. In her mind, confronting the ocean wasn't trauma, it was defiance. Jessop died peacefully in 1971, nicknamed Miss Unsinkable. Her story proves that some people aren't just lucky, they're so stubborn that even fate gets exhausted trying to kill them. Number 4. The Boy Who Fell from the Sky. Bahia Bakari. In 2009, Yemenia Flight 626 crashed into the Indian Ocean near the Comoros Islands. Out of 153 people on board, only 1 survived, a 12-year-old French girl named Bahia Bakari. She had never learned to swim. She clung to floating wreckage for 9 hours in the dark, surrounded by jet fuel and debris. She said she could hear voices calling for help at first, but one by one, they disappeared into silence. When fishermen finally found her, she was barely conscious, clinging to a piece of metal, trembling and covered in burns. Later she said, "I thought I was in a nightmare and would wake up." Doctors were stunned, minimal injuries, full recovery. Forensics later showed her survival came down to the way she was thrown clear of the fuselage, physics and fate colliding perfectly in her favor. It's haunting to imagine. A child alone in the ocean, the sole living witness to 100 final screams. Bahia Bakari's survival is proof that life sometimes picks its survivors with no logic, just randomness and resilience. Number 3, Alive Inside the Andes, the 1972 rugby team. In October 1972, a plane carrying 45 people, mostly members of a Uruguayan rugby team, crashed into the Andes Mountains. The survivors were stranded at 12,000 feet, surrounded by snow, with no heat, food, or rescue in sight. For 72 days, they fought off hypothermia, avalanches, and despair. But what made this story infamous wasn't just endurance, it was what they did to stay alive. When the last food ran out, the group made an unthinkable decision. They resorted to cannibalism. They ate the bodies of their dead teammates, frozen, preserved by the mountain cold, to survive. The choice haunted them, but it also kept them breathing. After weeks of silence from the outside world, 2 of them, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, trekked across the Andes for 10 days, barefoot and starving, to find help. When rescuers finally reached the crash site, only 16 people remained alive. The media called it the miracle of the Andes, but the survivors said it was anything but a miracle. It was the raw, ugly side of human instinct, the will to live when every moral law breaks. Parado later wrote, "I had tasted death, and it wasn't bitter. What was bitter was giving up." Number 2, the woman who walked out of Chernobyl. Lyudmilla Ignatenko. In April 1986, the Chernobyl disaster turned a Soviet city into a radioactive inferno. Among the people there was Lyudmilla Ignatenko, the wife of firefighter Vasily Ignatenko, one of the first responders to Reactor 4. When the explosion happened, Vasily rushed in without protection, fighting invisible flames of radiation. Lyudmilla followed him to Moscow, staying by his hospital bed even as his body deteriorated, his skin falling away, his organs shutting down. Doctors warned her, "Don't touch him, he's radioactive." She stayed anyway. He died 14 days later. Lyudmilla, pregnant at the time, gave birth to a baby girl who lived only 4 hours, because of the radiation her mother absorbed had transferred to the child. But Lyudmilla herself survived. Her story isn't about escaping danger, it's about walking through it. The human heart, it turns out, can outlast the body's tolerance for poison. In a strange way, she became a living relic of loyalty that defied nuclear fire. Decades later, when HBO's Chernobyl brought her story to light, viewers couldn't decide if she was a saint or a fool. Maybe she was both. Because real survival often demands loving something, even when it's already gone. Number 1, the woman who fell from the sky twice. Vesna Vulović. If fate has a twisted sense of humor, Vesna Vulović is its punchline. In January 1972, this 22-year-old Yugoslav flight attendant boarded JAT Flight 367 and became the sole survivor of the highest fall in aviation history. Mid-flight, a bomb exploded on board, tearing the DC-9 apart at 33,330 feet, over 10 kilometers. The plane disintegrated above Czechoslovakia. Everyone died, except Vesna. Her body was trapped by a food cart in the rear fuselage, which fell into a snowy forested hillside, cushioning the impact. When rescuers found her, she had a fractured skull, crushed legs, and 3 broken vertebrae. But she was alive. She slipped into a coma for 27 days, woke up, and eventually learned to walk again. Doctors said the cold and pressure drop knocked her unconscious before the crash. Her muscles relaxed, saving her from internal rupture. Investigations later revealed she wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. She'd been accidentally swapped in for another attendant with the same first name. She continued flying after recovery, though she never remembered the fall. Vesna's survival was certified by the Guinness World Records as the highest fall without a parachute. Her attitude after the event: quiet, humble, even humorous. She once said, "If I were lucky, I'd have never been in that plane at all." Still, she lived decades longer than the bomber who planted the device. Proof that sometimes luck and irony share the same parachute. That's it for today. I'll be doing similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.